Hey, it's Rod Yates here. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned. And my special guest today is singer-songwriter George William Lewis Jr., also known as Twin Shadow. Last year, George released his fifth full-length album called Twin Shadow. It brings together many of the influences he absorbed while growing up in Florida, from punk and indie to reggae and soul. But while George was raised in Florida, he was actually born in the Dominican Republic, and he returned there to start working on the self-titled record. We cover a lot of ground in this interview, from George's upbringing to his path into music, from the birth of Twin Shadow to his latest record and the good and bad times he's experienced along the way. But we started with me spectacularly mispronouncing the place of George's birth, the Dominican Republic, which is where George was when we caught up in mid-December. So you're back in the Dominican Republic now?
Yeah, a lot of people make that mistake. The Dominican Republican. I'm not a Dominican Republican. Yeah, I'm back in the Dominican Republic. My parents live here, and I'm back, and I'm actually working here at a studio called Fama Studio, working with some artists that they are working on, just producing for some people.
Oh, cool. I was wondering if you'd already started work on your next record.
I mean, I would love to be honest, but I've got some other duties to attend to first.
Sure.
And some inspiration to collect,
Yeah, gotcha. So what is Farmer like? Because I know that's where you recorded the self-titled album. How would you describe that studio?
It's this incredible gem that's in the middle of what's called La Zona. It's like the colonial section of the Dominican Republic in the capital. It's an insane studio. It's like state of the art, more equipment than I could ever get my hands on. And it's really beautiful. And it was such a great place to start my record. I also recorded it at my studio in LA.
Yeah.
But this was such a great start because it's sort of every piece of gear you could ever want or imagine to have, including incredible microphones. So it was a great place to kind of get the foundation of the record. And then it was just pulling stuff apart in LA, and kind of Frankensteining everything that I'd done down here.
Yeah. Could you hear the atmosphere of the studio and the atmosphere of the Dominican Republic in general in the album?
I think that for sure, people get it twisted on whether a place has influence because the music has elements of the music that is typical of the region. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, maybe not. But I feel this very sort of punky, tropical vibe that's on my record. And I very much think that it was inspired by the temperature, the humidity, all those natural things.
Yeah. And I know that you weren't raised in the Dominican Republic, but you were born there. Is there an element of a sense of belonging when you're back there, even though you weren't raised there?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there is, mostly because my mother was born here and raised here, and that my parents are back here. Mm. So it sort of feels like a second home. And there is a part of it that feels, I almost feel more welcome when I land here than I do in the States. The United States, you're always kind of like, oh man, what a strange place this is. I love it, and it's beautiful, but it's also incredibly insane.
Yeah. I think I'd read a quote from you where you said that one of the reasons you wanted to start the record in the Dominican Republic was because you couldn't quiet your mind in America. Mm. What did the Dominican Republic offer you in that regard?
It just is, anyone who's either from the island, or people go vacation to islands all the time, and you get this sense of peace here, and certainly there's turmoil everywhere in the world. But there's a sort of sense of humor in the people. There's a very beautiful heart and soul to the people in the Dominican Republic and all of the Caribbean islands. There's not this sort of, in America, we're sort of constantly chasing our careers and we're so goal-oriented, the American culture. And I am not immune to that, that's in my blood as well, having been raised there. So when I come here, it kind of helps me calm down my mind, and I don't think so much about, what's my next move, stuff like that.
And creatively, that's got to be really important and really enriching, I imagine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, certainly it is a creative thing, but even not from a creative level, like just on a spiritual level to begin with. It's just, it sets you up to have, I'm not a purist in thinking like, oh, you have to be peaceful to be creative. I think you can be creative in stressful settings. I think you can be creative in peaceful settings. And neither is better or worse. But for me, I needed that kind of sense of peace at that time to clear my head and start something new.
One of the things I'd read you saying is that you really wanted to try and rediscover the joy that music initially had provided you with when you went in to make this record. What period are you talking about there? That period when music initially gave you that joy?
Yeah, I think I'm talking about like when I first started producing my own music, even before the first Twin Shadow record was made. I had a 4-track recorder, and I was just obsessed with learning how to play bass really well, learning how to play saxophone again, as good as I could, really studying the piano and trying to become self-sufficient at many different instruments. I'd been in bands forever, and I was always frustrated by the kind of like diplomacy that you have to be in a band. And I saw how diplomacy sort of ruined the creative process, because sometimes you just need to just get it done. You just need to make something happen, and you don't need to discuss it.
Yeah.
And so there was a time period when I stopped being in bands and started really learning how to use recording equipment and really learning a lot, and also essentially being my own band, where it was very exciting because everything was new and I was good at nothing.
Right.
and when you're good at nothing, there's a lot of room to play, and that kind of playfulness is really important. And I think that I sort of put myself in that headspace again with this record.
So when do you think you lost that playfulness?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I lost it completely, but you start a project, you get some success, you go out on the road, you're constantly being forced into this situation where you're taking it really seriously. And that can damage your sense of playfulness, I think, over time. And it's hard to keep track of it. You don't realize you're losing it or losing the grasp of that very important thing. But it's very easy to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt that getting it back was a kind of clear my head and just like have fun with it and kind of pretend to be a band within myself, I guess, again.
Yeah. Was there, you said that it's very hard to realize that you're losing it, but there must be a moment where you wake up and go, something has to change. Do you remember that moment? Yeah,
I think that happens to me. It kind of happens at the end of every album cycle in a way. You've been on the road, you've done every last bit of promoting that you can do. You don't want to talk to anyone about what you're doing anymore, and you you just sort of shut down, and you have that moment where you're just like, am I having any fun? I don't know if I am.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out how to get back to that place, because it's really the only thing that's actually important.
Yeah.
Is enjoying yourself, or even if it's painfully enjoying yourself, you still have to enjoy it.
And you found the answer in the Dominican Republic for this record.
I did.
Right. So I think is it 6 months to the day since it came out today? I think was it July 9?
God, I don't know.
We're at December 9. How's it sitting with you?
It's good. I don't hate it yet, which is nice.
Does that happen?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. For me especially, I think I have this thing where I have to sort of hate what I've made in order to get into that whole process of being like, okay, I'm over it. Let's do the next thing,
Yeah.
But no, I really love this record, and one thing that's probably helped kind of keep it fresh for me, because really I think I started it almost 2 years ago now. What's kept it fresh was that kind of COVID break that we all had, and I didn't have to go out and tour it. And while I was really sad about that, it sort of gave me time to sort of enjoy the record before like beating the shit out of it live, you know? and just... people don't realize, I think, when you play songs over and over again, it's just like how, that phenomenon when you say a word enough times and it loses its meaning.
Right.
That same exact thing happens with playing songs live, and you kind of have to approach it every night in a different way, in order to kind of get something out of it. So because I didn't have to do all that stuff, it's still very fresh. I'm actually really excited because we have some shows booked for the end of January in the States, and I'm really excited to play those shows.
Yeah, nice. I guess as with a lot of your work, it's a very diverse record, and you can hear various touchstones. You can hear elements of maybe the Clash in Lone Star, and then there's the island vibe of Johnny and Johnny, and there are soulful elements in there as well. Was it in some ways an amalgam of some of your influences growing up, this punk and soul and island music?
Yeah, I think the roots of my playing music, not necessarily listening to music, started with punk rock music and like real classic punk rock, the Clash and Sex Pistols and stuff like that. So it was nice to flex something I'd never really done before. I mean, I had a punk band, and I think we were more sort of like in the vein of the Fugazis of the world. We were kind of like a mishmash of like post-hardcore indie rock, whatever that was.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get to kind of get out my second wave ska influences and my obsession when I was a kid of Bob Marley and things like that. And I was able to kind of put into this record a lot of those influences and not be ashamed of them and be excited by them, because I'm just not hearing them a lot in other music.
Yeah.
I love like calypso music, Harry Belafonte and stuff like that. And that, I feel like there's a lot of that in there that maybe a lot of people don't pick up on. But I love that music. And I'm glad I was able to make a record that showcases some of those influences.
Yeah. You mentioned Bob Marley as an early influence. So was Bob Marley someone that was in your house while you were growing up?
It was more so, I had my best friend Brenton. His parents would just play that greatest hits record on repeat,
right,
always. And I spent a lot more time at his house than my house when I was probably like 14 to 16. And that was just what we heard all the time. And I was obsessed with that music and still am. Bob Marley's one of those things, it gets so overplayed in so many of the wrong places. You're like buying swimming shorts and it's on in the shitty department store, and they're just abusing that perfect music. But when you take a step away from it and then you come back to it, you just can't even understand how prolific and how layered and how beautiful, because he was like melting all kinds of music together and really creating something new that you can't even really, it's almost a shame to just call it reggae, it's so its own thing.
Yeah. And
he's worlds apart from everyone else. And there's so much incredible music that came out of Jamaica, but Bob Marley, it just stands on its own. So yeah, it was nice to get some of that stuff out. But at the same time, I also have to mention, like, people are surprised by this too, the band Sublime,
right,
who essentially were like kind of in a weird way, sometimes a cover band almost.
Yeah.
But something about the way that they put together their influences and did it without any shame and did it really with a lot of sincerity. And that band was one of my favorite bands when I was like 8 years old. So, something like Lone Star or like some other stuff. And, there's heavy influences from them as well. It was a lot of influences from like very stuff that I really cherished in my early youth.
In terms of that early youth, the music that you cherished, where were you finding it? Was it coming from your parents, from your siblings? Were you on your own path to discover it? Where was it coming from?
I think it was just from kids in school, like I remember getting turned on to like Green Day by a girl in my class who made me, she had the Dookie CD and she dubbed it on a tape for me. And I can't even remember how I got into like Sublime. It was just like, I guess it was because I got into it before their like radio hit somehow. I really don't remember.
Yeah, fair enough.
And at that time it would have also been just downloading tons of stuff off LimeWire at random and seeing what you liked, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess, I actually can remember when I guess radio had some influence on me, I guess we listened to the radio a lot. And when I was a kid, I was also really into R&B as well. And that was always playing on the radio. So I guess the radio. But my parents also had great taste in some great taste in music. And, I remember like Paul Simon's Graceland was always playing in my house. And I'm really not a Paul Simon fan at all. But that record, he fades away and he fades to me. His songwriting's great, but he fades away and you just hear the musicians playing on that record and you're just like, it's music from another planet, especially when you're a kid,
Absolutely. What did your parents do?
My father was a teacher and my mother was owned a hair salon.
Really?
Yeah.
What did your dad teach?
Oh, he's taught everything. History, he was a guidance counselor. He sort of did it all.
Okay. In the song Eclipse, off that record Eclipse, you have that line, you eclipse me, which I believe was that written with your mum in mind in terms of a song about her strength that you saw growing up?
I honestly can't remember.
Really?
I can't remember. I mean, that's one of those things where when I write songs, if you'd interviewed me 2 months after that record came out, I would have maybe been able to tell you what it was about, and maybe I've said it in an interview before, but I really can't remember. I definitely can't remember that time period.
Fair enough.
But not that I don't want to shout out my amazing mother. She's incredible.
Right. And you had siblings as well, sisters as well, is that right?
Yeah, I have a twin sister and then 2 other sisters.
Right. So you grew up in a very feminine household, I guess.
I did, very, very much so, and I'm so glad for it. I feel bad for anyone who grew up with just brothers.
Right. Why is that?
Well, I think that especially in the world that we live in the consciousness of the world, I think the feminine approach to everything is more, in general, more right. I think that it's more nuanced and more beautiful. And I think that the world would be better off if the feminine kind of took charge over things. I think the masculine is confused and violent. Not to say that it's bad; it's just confused and violent.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm lucky that I grew up around a lot of strong feminine energy.
Yeah. So you're listening to music growing up, you're hearing Sublime, you've got the influence of Bob Marley. At what point are you thinking that you want to actually try and learn an instrument?
Well, really, I played saxophone when I was in 6th grade. I was always getting in trouble, and as part of some punishment, I had some extra class that I had to add to the end of my school day when everybody else got this sort of recess kind of, or just like they got to hang out basically. And I had to add a class, and I just didn't want to do science or math or anything like that. And so I tricked the principal into allowing me to join the 8th grade band. So I was the 6th grader in the 8th grade band, and I learned how to play saxophone. And really, it wasn't about music. It was about not wanting to do a math class. But somehow, I don't know, I just fell in love with playing the saxophone. And my teacher, Mr. Berman, I still remember him, he really gave me a great opportunity and taught me a lot of what he knew. And somehow it had a really big impact on me.
In what way? Just that him passing on that knowledge?
Yeah, and just the way that he the way that he sort of embraced me, and it was an uphill battle for me to join the band knowing nothing, and everybody had been studying already. And he took me under his wing, not in the way that you'd imagine in a movie script. It was very hard. It was like he sort of put me in a cold, air-conditioned room and shoved a book in front of my face and said, "Here, learn this." But it sort of defined the way that I learn how to play all the instruments I play, which is just like I have to find the need to do it. And then based on the desire, it made me hungry, I guess. It made me hungry. It made me incredibly curious, I guess.
Right. Do you remember that feeling of actually learning the instrument and playing in the band, being part of that unit?
Yeah, I remember it was like a Christmas concert that we were doing, and he asked me to, he told me I had to learn a piece before I could actually join the rest of the band on stage. And I remember sort of playing for him and him being like, "Oh, wow, you got good really fast." And he put me in the band, and I played that Christmas concert. And I can't remember if I did well or not.
Sure.
But I probably didn't. But yeah, it was amazing. Of course, I felt, it's, and in that way, it's kind of one of those classic stories where all the other saxophone players were just like, "What the hell is this kid doing in here, squeaking and making all this noise?" But yeah, it was a really important step for me in music.
I feel it is really important to have someone believe in you and say, "You're getting good at this." Like that's so crucial, I think.
Completely, yeah. I mean, it's totally essential, because most people, they see people failing at something, and either they put them down because, most of the time I think they put them down because they don't want to see somebody struggle, But occasionally you get that person who sort of tells you to keep at it, and that's really important.
Yeah. So you said that to start playing sax was because I guess you were going to be put in detention or have to do an extra class or something. Were you a mischievous kid at school?
I was sort of class clown for sure. I wasn't getting in fights all the time. I just was sort of causing disruptions, I guess, a lot. Which is weird because when I think about it too, I was sort of a very shy kid as well. But I think that always happens with shy kids. They tend to kind of find a role as a class clown, and that is our way of getting that attention that we seek because we're shy otherwise.
So at what point does guitar enter the equation? When do you see a guitar and think that's my next step?
So actually that is directly related to the saxophone playing in the band. I remember there was a kid, I wish I remembered his name because I'd like to thank him, but I can't remember his name. There was a kid who was a trumpet player, and after band rehearsals were over, he would go and he'd grab this guitar out of the closet, and he would sit and he'd play, and they'd open the band room door, and all these girls would come and circle him, and he'd play. I remember he played Radiohead songs on his guitar, and I just sort of immediately started turning my back on saxophone in that moment. I just was like, "Oh, like this is the thing that actually gets you attention. I like this." And so that was really, really exciting for me and to see. And I guess I had thought about like how much I liked singing, but I never thought, "Oh, wow, like, right, you can't sing and play the saxophone at the same time, but you can sing and play guitar." And so it all started to make sense,
After the break, George talks about the birth of Twin Shadow, his experiences with depression, and much more. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Twin Shadow. I think I've seen you talk about, when you were 14, you just wanted to be like the world's best guitarist. Like, who are you listening to? Who's inspiring you?
Well, yeah, of course, like, Jimi Hendrix and, people like that. But I don't know, at that time period, it was also like, Kurt Cobain and Dave Matthews Band. And that's one I rarely drop, but I'm not ashamed anymore. And just anything really, you know. I think, you know, the beauty of the 90s was that there was so much guitar playing going on, and there was so much to pick up on. Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, the Melvins, Metallica. It's crazy how, like, at that time, it's like I never even thought about genre really. I thought Metallica and Jimi Hendrix were the same thing,
Right?
you know. Certainly not much longer after that, and you start defining yourself, and you create those divides in terms of what you think is good and bad, and has no taste and has taste, or whatever it is. But there was so much to be influenced by, especially with guitar, and with guitar as this like tool to write songs. And, you know, I didn't write songs for a very long time. I don't think I wrote a song. I started playing guitar when I was 14, but I don't think I actually wrote a song until I was maybe 17 or something.
Did you try forming cover bands or anything? Like, was there, once you get the guitar and you get good at it, you're like, right, let's get some mates together?
Oh yeah. I mean, my first band was like a Bob Marley ripoff band, but I mean, we weren't even a band. I think we played, we rehearsed to play 2 songs, I think, at a talent show.
And they were Bob Marley covers?
I think they were. I think we did No Woman to Cry. It was like, you know, typical Florida, embarrassing, God help me if they find the VHS tape type stuff, you know?
So is there a scene in Florida? Are you starting to see what's happening in the scene as well? Are you taking an interest in bands? Are you going to see gigs?
Around the time when I was 16, when I dropped out of high school, I got to sort of see a bit of a music scene that had developed in my area. And it wasn't, by music scene, I mean, that's a liberal use of that word, because it was hardly anything. But to credit some of the guys who were in that scene, there was a place called the Blue Parrot, and, you know, they just thought of me as some annoying kid who didn't know how to play. But they let me on stage, and I would basically go to these jam sessions with players who were much better than me. I remember actually Jaco Pastorius' son used to play at this particular jam, and I can't imagine what they thought when I would get on stage with them, because I didn't know at all what I was doing. But I would either bring a saxophone or I'd bring my guitar, and I'd try to hang out with them and try to play with them, and they let me hang out enough. I learned a lot, and I met this guy Zach, and Zach was the first person I ever met who wrote his own songs, and that changed everything for me.
Right. I was going to say, that's a pretty ballsy move, to turn up knowing that these players are much better than you, but you're still going to get up there and give it a go. Did you just have this self-belief or this self-confidence that you could do it?
I don't know if it was self-confidence. It was just, I guess that it was more an ignorance. I was more naive, you know? I think that people underestimate naivete.
Yeah.
I think that that's more important than self-determination, actually. Self-determination is kind of a boring thing. Being naive and getting lost in something is much more important. It generates more, there's more honesty in it. And there's more, it allows hunger to become a very real driving force.
Yeah.
And I think that was it. I just was stupid. and being stupid is the best thing to be.
Yeah. So when you drop out of school at 16, what's the plan? Music?
No plan. I think the plan at that time was just to go to parties. I think that was it. No, I guess I had a little bit of I'm going to start a music career, but I can't remember really. I just think it was, again, I was sort of just lost in it was more so like, I want to grow up. I don't want to be in high school with it. I understood that enough, you know. I understood that wasn't where I was going to grow up, you know. It was important for me to go to these nightclubs, these bars at night and play with people who were older than me. It just that I became obsessed with it, you know?
Yeah, right. So when you go traveling, in your late teens or early 20s and you head over to Europe, are you just searching for anything over there, or is it just another adventure?
Well, I didn't go to Europe until I was actually in my early 20s.
Oh, early 20s. Okay.
I moved to Boston for a while because my sister went to college there, and that's where I started a band with that guy Zach, who I mentioned.
Yeah.
We started a band, and I think originally he sort of thought we were going to be kind of a weird acoustic jam band type band, and then I'd been getting into punk music for quite some time, but kind of secretly for some reason. And there was a bit of a punk scene actually in Florida. My friend Tim played in this punk band called The Boyfriends, and I remember seeing them, and I was just like, "Oh, this is so much better than the shit that we're making. This is really cool." And I just loved the scene, and I loved the energy so much more than everything else that I was seeing. So I kind of secretly had always wanted to do that. I just wanted to be loud. I wanted to scream. I didn't want to sing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to scream a lot. And so I kind of molded our thing into this kind of punk band, I guess. And that's really where I started playing shows and playing at clubs and doing the whole thing of booking our first tour and going out we had a school bus that we bought, and going out in the school bus and touring America and failing miserably at all of it,
Is this like a big yellow school bus, like one of those school buses you see in the movies?
It was a short bus. It was a short bus, and it was it had about, I think, 5 rows of seats in it.
Okay.
But it looked like a short school bus, but it was painted. It was spray painted the ugliest maroon color ever. But it had the doors, the school bus doors and everything. Yeah.
And when you say failing, though, was there fun in failure? Was there a sense of adventure in that failure?
There's a lot of pain in that particular band, but there was a lot of fun. We played. We got really good. It was the first time where I'd been in a band with people where we just got so good, and even if we hated each other at times, we really learned a language together. Yeah, we could kind of do anything. We were really sort of invincible on stage, and that was the first time I had ever experienced that. And we were it's hard for me to say that we were good. Our music was good, but as players we were really good because we were really in tune with each other. And that was the first time I ever experienced that. And that became very important to me, which was cool.
Yeah. What was the name of that band?
It was called Madman Films.
Madman Films. Okay.
The worst band name ever.
So
that's probably the first. This might be a first. A first. I don't think I've ever said that band name in an interview. Maybe I have. I'm not sure.
Right. So how does everything you learn in that inform what you go on to do with Twin Shadow? When you have this idea for Twin Shadow, are there lessons that you learned from those experiences that you thought, right, this is what I want to do, this is what I don't want to do? Did you have a good idea?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was in that band, and then after that band, I tried a solo project, which gave me a taste of what it meant to sort of be the leader and decision maker. But that project, I still had people playing with me on the records.
And this is in Boston?
Yeah, well, I kind of was transitioning to New York at this point.
Okay.
Then I was in a band called Drug Rug with some friends. It was their band, and I played bass for them. And I learned a lot going on tour with them and playing bass for them. So all these experiences added, I had a noise band called the Black Sound. It also informed me a lot, I think the thing that I learned the most about myself was how much I really hated this democratic process of art making. I really thought, this is not how I will thrive making music. I need to be in charge. I need to hit the record button. I need to play the instruments. I need to write the songs. I need to do everything, for better or worse. And I really do believe that there's a lot of negative that comes from that kind of mindset. But for me, it was the only way for me to really really solidify what I wanted to create.
Right. And hence Twin Shadow is born?
And Twin Shadow was born.
Right. Avi, do you remember coming up with the concept? Do you remember the moment that you thought, I'm going to call this Twin Shadow, it's going to do this, it's going to be this, it's going to represent this?
I wish that the story was like kind of crystal clear. I do remember I was at my favorite Chinese food spot, and I was, after digging through my couch for quarters, for $4.75 worth of quarters to get a General Tso's chicken, which it would usually last me about 4 days in Brooklyn. I remember sitting there waiting for my food and it hitting me like, oh, Twin Shadow's the name. And it was pretty clear. And I remember I was debating on whether it should be Twin Shadow or Twin Shadows with an S. And so I went home and with a big Sharpie, I wrote it across my apartment wall to see it really big. And I decided the singular would make me feel better.
Sure.
But it's kind of, the path to that moment was so layered with tons of experimentation, we'd have to sit here for hours
Sure.
to talk about all the tiny steps that I took to feel comfortable enough to be like, okay, I know what this is.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. And so, sorry, just that moment of coming up with the name Twin Shadow. Why Twin Shadow?
Well, I had a lot of reasons. I'm a twin, and there were all these photos of us when we were kids, and I was kind of always just sort of like, in all the photos, I was just sort of somber and in the corner a lot, and my twin was a little more kind of alive and had a lot more energy, and it's still that way today.
Right.
And also there's a Cassavetes film about a twin brother and sister who are mixed raced, and it's called Shadows. I don't know if they're twins, but they're brother and sister who are really, really close. And it just reminded me of my sister and I. And then there were a bunch of other things. There was some motorcycle imagery in there that also twin engine, one of the most famous motorcycles that's most coveted, kind of holy grail of motorcycles, is called the Vincent Black Shadow. And that was some of my interests as well. So that was in there.
There's a lot of layers.
Yeah. When you're forming your band name, you think you're making the most important decision of your life. And sometimes you are,
So when you've all those experiences you were just talking about, and now you're doing it yourself, you're the one pressing the record button, this is your vision. When you released Forget in 2010, your debut album, do you remember how that moment felt, that you'd actually done this? You'd got it to this point where you had something physical out in the world, and it was you. Yeah,
it was scary. I mean, I was scared. It's funny. I think I remember calling my manager once and telling him that the song Forget, I wanted to pull it off the record. And him just writing me, he was just like, this is the most important song on the record. What are you talking about? It feels so personal your first time out. Because, I'd put out records with bands, but this felt like unlike anything else. This was the most important moment of my life, And I was freaked out. But once it was out and I got this sort of almost immediate kind of attention, which I'd never gotten with my music before. Yeah, I just was like, oh my God, this is like such a cool thing. But nothing was as great as when I finished the songs. When I finished the songs, like the feeling that you get from that, I can't even describe that feeling. That really was the magical moment. Accolades and recognition is great, but I can't quite tell you the importance and the deepness of the feeling when I was finished with those songs, and I played them back to myself, and I didn't like this feeling that you get where you don't even understand really how you made it. You don't even feel like you made it. You don't feel like you are even a part of it. Is pretty incredible.
Is that something that you reach for with every record?
you can't reach for that stuff, you know. You do yourself a huge disservice trying to find that feeling.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Okay. The song Forget, which you wanted taken off the record. Why did you want that one removed?
It felt so personal to me. It just felt like, when I listen to it now, I don't think about it in that way. But at that time, it felt like I was like showing everybody my diary, you know? And I just didn't, I never had been that vulnerable, I guess, in a song before. And also, it's a very dark song. Like, they'll give us something, they'll give us so much to forget or enough rope to deal with it. It was like this really hopeless lyric that felt so heavy. And, you know, I don't hear a lot of hope in that song, but it is this very real thing about it that just freaked me out. I was just like, whoa, you know?
Yeah. I guess that darkness and that depression, or I assume the depression that suggests, I think you've spoken about that sort of manifesting, particularly after the release of Confess, that you had a depressive episode. And I know that your father had depressive episodes as well. Seeing that in your father, did that make it easier for you to recognize that in yourself, that this is what was happening?
I think I'm lucky in that, having dealt with a lot of mental illness at a very young age, yeah, I had a pretty deep understanding of what it was. Certainly, it's never easy to recognize mental illness in yourself. You know, I think oftentimes it needs to be kind of called out by another person. But I guess it helps me deal with it in a somewhat less destructive way. I feel like having seen it destroy someone else, you know.
Are there techniques that you've developed that help you?
Yeah, I think constant movement, you know, constantly sort of evolving your way of thinking. You know, what I've realized now is more important than anything is really community. You really, it's so easy to fall into a pit when it's just you running the show. You have to have community. You have to have some sense of, you know, a lot of people don't have family, or family is a very kind of fucked up thing a lot of the time. And so having friendships that are very honest, even if they're difficult, is really important. And finding some community with something that you love, you know. I'm so impressed by things like you know, AA communities and things like that, where I'm like, oh wow, these people really need each other, and they really do help each other in a huge way. I think I'm starting to realize that's sort of the most important thing. And during Confess, my keyboard player, Win, she really was my community. She made me get up every day and go to the computer and write songs, even though I didn't want to. She dragged me into the chair and made me work, because she didn't know what was going on, but she figured, you know, the only thing that I've ever seen make you happy is making music, so you're gonna do that. You know,
right? So
I really owe her for Confess. Wouldn't have happened without her. I don't know what would have.
Yeah, really. I think one of the really touching things that I know you've done is after that terrible bus accident you had in 2015, and you got very badly damaged, but your drummer Andy Bauer also got very badly hurt. And rather than replace him for shows, you started, I guess, figuring out loops and beats and samples that. So rather than just pull someone else out and say, "All right, Andy, you're gone," you didn't do that. Is that indicative of that sense of community, which did that kind of drive that decision, that idea of a found family and community, just to not push him to the side?
Yeah, I think on that tour for sure it was. I don't think I was ready to move on to playing with someone else, because we'd played with Andy for so long, and he was such a good drummer, and we've got so used to that, you know. Certainly there are other reasons, you know, either not being able to find someone who felt like they fit in. But really on that particular tour, I sort of made it a point that, the computer was now Andy, and Andy was still out on the road with us,
Right.
And that felt good. That felt good for that period of time. And it is, drummers, I'm going to say this for the record, drummers are not easy to get along with. They're not, they're just a problematic group of people. And it's the hardest piece of a band it's the thing that needs to be the most dialed, and it's the hardest thing to kind of like make chemistry with. And so, it was very hard.
I wondered after that accident, how hard was it to actually get back in a bus when you started to tour again?
Yeah, it sucked. It still sucks a bit, because when you've been through it, and you can kind of almost visualize it before it happens, type thing, or you get it's easy to get very paranoid about it, and yeah, it's hard. We've been on, I think, maybe 4 tours after that, so I think my fear of it is not as present as it was, but I think at the same time it's like, I can't say it enough, that the feeling that you get when you play for people, once you've done all the arriving, and you get on stage and you play for people, that feeling, it really makes all the heartache worth it. There's really nothing like playing for an audience, and especially playing for fans. People who buy your tickets and they wait for that show to come because their whole week is planned around it. That's one of the most incredible things about making music.
Yeah. Nice. George, very last thing. Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people you'd give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
I should have written this down because I'm going to forget people. But I mean, my manager, Eddie B, has been huge in my life, in both my life and my career. Wynn Bennett, my keyboard player for a long time, her husband, Guillermo Brown, all the people who were involved in this record, which I'm going to forget all the people, but I had some friends who wrote with me, my friend Ray, Arturo, who was my studio assistant during this record, In Grooves, who I put this record out on my label, but they were instrumental in funding a bunch of the record. I mean, there's too many people to mention.
Sure. Takes a village.
It does take a village, and I'm somebody who oftentimes likes to work outside the village, but it really does take a village. There's so many other people. Jess, my manager's assistant, it was incredible on getting this record done. Matt Miner, so many people. They all know who they are, I suppose.
Hey, George, thank you so much for your time, mate. It's been great to chat with you.
Yeah, man, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to George for his time, and thank you for listening. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's Humans of Music, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.